Great. Can you guys see my slides? Awesome.
Yes.
Um, well, if it's okay, I think I'm going to get started. Sorry again, everyone, for the technical glitches this morning. I'd love to just be able to open really quickly with this idea, what is extreme prematurity, and then just share my gratitude that we are joined by at least one mom of an extremely preterm baby, maybe two today, just about their experiences of having an extremely preterm baby and really what we can learn as far as family-centered communication as teams that care for these babies going forward. So I just want to start by kind of putting this in perspective. When it comes to extreme prematurity, I'm really talking about babies born at 22 and 23 weeks. Overall, it's a really small percentage of babies born in the US. In 2012 to 2016, just 0.12%. But I think when we think about babies in our NICU, we know that this makes up a percentage with a really high morbidity and mortality, and babies that are really cared for a very long period of time in our hospitals. So it's an important population. I think historically, when we think about these babies, we know that resuscitation of babies this young was really first published in Japan about 15 years ago and was taken up by particular centers in areas across the US, but really still even today, not necessarily completely widespread. There's been some regionalization of this care. And we know that during the same time period, as far as babies that don't receive intervention at these gestational ages, 54% at 22 weeks not receiving intervention, 15% at 23 weeks. We also know that there are certain ethnic and racial disparities when it comes to care of these babies. And the extreme preterm team really was born out of this idea of wanting to address family-centered care and address these disparities. So just to put this in perspective, how very risky and sick it is to be born at these early ages. We know that the most current national data for 22-week survival, all comers 2013 to 2018 is 30% at 22 weeks and 55% at 23 weeks. So in Colorado, at the University of Colorado, we have come up with this extreme preterm team. It started in February of 2022. And we had three main goals. One was to really become a regional leader in the care of these babies. The second was really to improve health equity when it comes to care for these families and these infants. And then I think the third and really the heart of this is valuing family-centered care. So making sure we're always exploring the family's goals, providing care that's in line with that. And also, I think, especially for these initial babies, providing some transparency that this is really a new local practice in a lot of ways, especially when it came to 22-week prematurity, and that this hadn't necessarily been done at altitude before. So just important pieces of how the framework for how we tried to roll out our program. Before we hear stories and get to questions for families, I'd just like to express some gratitude, first and foremost, for our families and babies who really trusted us with their care. And now we're continuing to help other families who are going through this experience. So we very much appreciate it. And of course, the really dedicated team of nurses, RTs, NMPs, pharmacists, dietitians, all of our fellows and neonatologists who work at university have provided so many hours of care for these families and babies. Thank you. And also to the Centers of Excellence who really shared their knowledge with us and experiences as we try to push the care of these babies forward. So that was introduction a little bit, very briefly, about extreme prematurity, about the goals of our team. I know I saw Stephanie Hauser first, and I'm just looking at the time, thinking about how to break this up. I don't know if we have Lourdes Gonzalez on as well, but I'd like to first kind of start, if you wouldn't mind, Stephanie, with a little bit about your story with extreme prematurity, especially as it centers on communication. And then I think I'll follow up if it's all right with a few questions and from the group as well. So I'd love to turn it over if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm Steph Hauser. Our son Zev was born at UC Health in January of 2019. He was 23 weeks, and by the time of delivery, technically had crossed over into the 23 and 2, but only by I arrived when we were still right on the cusp there. I was generally unprepped. I had had one shot of betamethasone, but it was a real like the baby's coming really soon. If this may or may not even matter. And we airlifted from Boulder down to UC Health, and we were able to have a vaginal delivery. And Zev, at just 23 weeks, came out crying. So he was born and surprised everyone in the room um, by crying on basically no lungs. And from there, we started our 5-month stay at the UC Health NICU. And yeah, I would say, speaking to the care of families, I mean, I might be UC Health's like number one fan. I feel like we owe our son's life to the team there. Truly, we had no option for birth and survival even at all. At our previous hospital, which makes sense. They wouldn't have been able to treat a 23-weeker. But when we arrived at UC Health, it wasn't like our odds were any better. We didn't get there and then the narrative was like, well, here we are, and you're going to have this baby, and he's going to live and it'll be great. What really we arrived to was, your baby under all circumstances. I had what was later determined essentially to be chorioamnionitis that had started in my uterus early in pregnancy. I had heavy bleeds with Zev. And I delivered at 23 weeks unexpectedly. We were not aware that this is what was going on until Zev arrived, really. But when we arrived at UC Health via helicopter, the odds were less than 1% of survival. We were told that. We were cared for in receiving all that information, but it's not like we got there with a guaranteed chance. And yet there was this feeling in the room and in the environment and with our team that was very, we're going to give you this information. We're not going to qualify it. We're not going to say this is what's going to happen. We're going to just let you hold this information and make, the choice. Would you like us to resuscitate your baby at birth? 23 weeks, these are the odds. And it was really beautiful because, like I said, it's not like the odds of Zev's survival were any better, really, at UC Health with a 23-weeker. But there was a spirit of, but we can see. We can try. I had to decide whether we wanted Zev resuscitated and whether I wanted a cesarean if it came to an emergency. And even that, there was just a lot of kindness in the choice and decision making. There was a lot of space for us to decide what was going to be right for us as a family. Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I talk about it. It's literally our life's work now because we have such an incredible story. Zev beat all the odds and lives today a healthy and thriving 5-year-old boy. And we have a podcast about it, and we have a nonprofit that supports our micro preemie families. And yeah, it's been an incredible journey for us. So it all started with literally landing on the hospital at UC Health. There were some of the doctors doing rounds up in Boulder. They heard that I was in labor. Our only option was to birth and let Zev pass on our chest. And they said, hey, we'll just call down. We'll just see if it's possible. And off we went. And the rest is history.
Wow, it's such a remarkable story, Stephanie. And I'm just,
It is.
I probably should share with the group that I did have the honor of caring for Zeb just really briefly and initially. So I did get to experience some of his amazing story, and and I hope that especially because so many others have cared for Zeb as well, that we can just hear about the communication from the team as just frankly as you want to provide, because I think there are so many elements to this, the antenatal counseling, your experience in the unit, what it's like to communicate for his medical needs going forward
Yeah.
after discharge. So if it's okay, I'd love to open the questions, kind of thinking about that beginning period where you're in Boulder and now okay, this is potentially an option, but we know the odds aren't great.
Mhm.
And kind of when we think about prenatal consultation, and knowing that we're often, really counseling families in times of crisis, What do you think are really the most salient points in your mind from the parent experience to get across in that kind of brief moment of crisis? What's the most important thing you wanted to hear in that moment?
It's interesting because I was actually just talking to Dr. Barry about this on our podcast, the Zev Project, but we were talking about this idea of there seemed to be this unique sense in the room that gave us as a family, so Ben, my husband, and I, a sense of space to make a decision. So a lot of the times in the NICU, we talk about it a lot, like you're making these impossible decisions about your children. At one point, Zev, um, 2 weeks into life, he just completely tanked and it was over. And we had an option to give him dexamethasone, but everything else had been used. Zev was still failing. The writing was on the wall. We were saying goodbye. But the dexamethasone came with a really high risk of cerebral palsy, which was already a high risk anyway for a 23-weeker. We anticipated that Zeb would have cerebral palsy anyway. But this medication, we were told would have accelerated that, would have essentially wiped out so much of his brain function. And so we had to decide, are we willing to try it and sort of live this life of like a 95% chance of Zev never walking, never talking, never eating, never breathing on his own, all these nevers, or, allow him to pass peacefully, avoid this suffering. And in both instances, the team was able to hold the space for us to decide what was right for us and what felt important at that time. Now, for us, we did not, we hoped that Zeb would live. And I don't mean hope as a like, oh, we want this to happen. I mean it more of like, we found ourselves in a place of just saying, whatever happens, we're just going to believe that we can get through this. So whether Zev lives or dies or never, 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 we believe that we will rise to whatever journey is put ahead of us. And we were willing to walk that road. And I say that's a choice, except in the NICU, most of the time it's not even a choice. It just is whatever's happening, right? So, when we got to the hospital the night of Zeb's birth, we didn't know that Zeb would come out crying. That we have it on video, and people are like surprised. Everybody in the room is kind of like, "Oh, like this kid is here," And and I think there's an element that we were offered by the team of, listen, we don't know all the outcomes. We don't know what is next for your son. We don't know if he's going to come out breathing or not. We don't, whatever. But we're willing to just sit here and do our best and show up for you in the way that you find best for your family. And for us, it was, we could see Zev on a monitor and we could hear that heartbeat. And we just thought, until that heartbeat stops, we have a chance. And it wasn't that life was the most important thing to us. I think a lot of people think that. They think about us if they're looking at our story like, oh, we only wanted life for him. What we did want that. We wanted our son. He was our baby. And even though he was small enough to fit into my hand, it's like we're looking at this fetus that is ours, but the reality of it is we were willing to let Zev pass. We believe in the dignity of death for our son. We believed in releasing the outcome, but we weren't willing to say, hey, this is the only option possible for him is death. We were willing to say, hey, if you're all willing to take us there, we're going to go right there with you. It felt very team oriented that we were all working for the betterment of our son. There was a lot of trust. I honestly, I said this to Dr. Barry. I don't know what the special sauce is at UC Health, but like it is unique to what you all do. Because there was immediate trust. There was no pushing of opinions. There was no, if your kid has CP, this is, the outcome you're expecting. It was just, hey, whatever happens next, we have the resources and the tools to help walk you through it. And we were able to say, okay, now we can make a decision. Now we can sort of sit in a place that wasn't so panicked, that wasn't so afraid of the outcome, right? We would always say to the doctors, anytime the team would say negative, it's not even negative, just information about Zev, and it was usually not great. Zev, a 23-weeker is no joke. I think people see Zev and they're like, oh, 23 weeks, like Zev is a very unusual outcome. He does not have cerebral palsy. He has a flow vent inhaler. and glasses. Like, and that's what Zev is walking around with. That's it from 23 weeker. And yet for us, people would say things like, oh, he's had two of the biggest level brain bleeds. His whole brain is wiped out at this point, whatever. We don't know, but we know it's bad. And we would say, okay, well, tell me what's good. And then it would be able to sort of balance that fear for us. And there was room in the interactions for us to ask questions, for us to be curious, we're in trauma too. Like we also were like, we might have been friendly and all this stuff, but like I look back at that mom and I'm like, oh boy, like I was, we're making friends in the NICU, we're walking around and meeting all the other parents, like we're forming all these bonds, like that's just who I am. But truly, we had the space to say, hey, we're going to grieve and we're going to hope in the same breath. And you all in the team allowed us to meet, you just met us in that place to say, we're right there with you. So however this goes, we'll tell you what we can, but we're going to hold that space too. We're going to let you hold all of those feelings and we're just going to walk with you as they come. I don't know if that's helpful.
No, thank you so much. I think, you're talking about that dichotomy of balancing the hopefulness and the reality. And it's bringing the memories back from the team side of thinking about remembering when he really wasn't monitored and really not knowing what it was going to be like when he was delivered. And I think for those who have joined us who maybe don't have as much background with extreme prematurity, I think we all have this sense of as we drop down in gestational age, the risks get bigger. Not only, of course, for a baby's survival, but also for their developmental outcomes. But when it comes to these really early gestational ages, the sex of the baby and whether or not they've had steroids can play a huge role as well. So, I mean, when we think about a male baby unprepped at 23 weeks, it's just extremely risky, as you mentioned. And at that same time, not knowing and not having him monitor and come out and he cries for the team. And I remember his dad speaking his name over him. It was really important at that moment for him to hear his name. It was a really great moment, I think, for our team as well. You could kind of see the relief in the whole room. Obviously, we knew he had an incredibly long road ahead, as did your family.
Mhm.
But that really was a beautiful moment, I think, for our team as well. You mentioned a little bit about the kind of unique and heavy position that families are in who are facing resuscitation decisions, and maybe not even just that initial decision, but as you mentioned, with the steroids later. I think the literature around this would say we always hope to be joining with families and that's really a shared decision, that we help provide information and get values from the family and reflect that back regarding what path. But that's not always what we end up doing as teams. And that can be really hard because families can either be left feeling alone in their decision or as if a team is making the decision, neither of which is really what we're necessarily aiming for. And some families will discuss, well, there's past experiences with family members with medical problems or hopefulness or, information they got, whether it was from other people or from technology or even their own spirituality. What do you feel like as far as wrestling with some of these decisions was really important for you, and how can our team support that?
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like for me, and Dr. Barry and I talked a lot about this idea of like the kids are going to tell you where they're at, what they're doing, if they're going to survive, if they're not. And like I said, we were really prepared to let Zev go. I think we were really fighting for his life, but we were also really willing and open to just saying, hey, whatever the outcome here is, it's just going to be, we can only do so much. And Zev just continued to live. I don't know what else to say. I will say that that night was fascinating because I think there's something about like when we did speak Zev's name and we said, Zev, we hear you. There was something very like connecting. I mean, we have a spiritual practice. Um, I believe in miracles and stuff, but that's kind of what the tell me what's good thing would do. We would be like, okay, I everything is falling apart. So I'm just going to ask what's good. And whether we decide to turn off Zev's machines or keep them going, we're going to just have more balanced information in our hearts. There's not this fear of what the outcome would be anymore, because now instead of fear driving the bus, it's just hope, possibility, what could be instead of what would be. Now, that's just us. When I heard that we had a less than a 1% chance that Zev would even live through birth, I literally thought to myself, well, 1% chance. Okay, well, that means there's some kid somewhere that lived at 23 weeks, and that could be our kid. Like, that's me, which is like, I mean, I think sometimes it might be unique like that, but it's not that I'm denying the reality that there's a 99% chance that Zev's not even going to come out alive, but I would see it as more of like that 1% means that there's a chance here. And I was willing to take it. And I think my partner and I, there was unity between the two of us in that. That was really helpful. And like I said, I never felt like in those critical moments that the doctors were working against us. Do you know what I'm like what you're saying about like you guys are making the choice instead of us or whatever? It felt very much we have experienced that with a medical care team, with Zev even. Um, and what is different about the care we received at UC Health is that it did feel like they would say, hey, here are the outcomes. What would you like to do? Here we are. Now, when it's life-saving, heroic care, there's really not a choice. You guys all did your thing. Thank God, because Zev's alive today because of it. We didn't have to shoulder that. Now that we're past this experience and I'm actually getting feedback from our nurses and friends at that time and our staff, I mean, you guys were showing us a little bit of what was going on. I mean, there were times Zev's bagged, you're trying to get him resuscitated, all this kind of stuff. And we're like, here's hoping, but like so much is happening and you all just showed up when Zev was fighting for his life. I mean, he was sitting at 24% O2, like just for like forever. I mean, that could be brain damage. That's everything. I mean, Zev's body is failing. He's dying. And we are standing there and we are like warring for this little kid's life. The team is in there. There's like 7 to 10 doctors just working on Zev, trying to just get him back to life. Nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. I feel like we experienced a miracle that night, but like it was not us alone fighting for our child. The whole team felt like they were for us. Whether Zev lived or died, it was like we felt that from other people in that hospital saying like, if you are going to go for life for this child, then we are going to go all in too. Like I remember like somebody asked, they're like, do you need a priest? Like we need to call them now if you need one. And I was like, no way. I was like, the only way we're going to need a priest is to confirm the miracle we're about to see. Like I was like, we're in a fever pitch here because Zev is gone. We had just gotten the call that like, you better get here fast or sign him off to be held by somebody so he doesn't die in bed. Right. Like we're not even at the hospital. We had left for dinner. I think the hospital staff was so kind to say, get out of here for a sec. Stop sitting over your kid being like, live, 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 live. Like give him a second. And Zev tanked. And by the time we got back, it was critical. And within 2 hours, he came back. I don't know what happened that night, but I think, we were in minutes. We were given, you have, 10 minutes. And then we're literally shutting off machines. Get ready, and then Zev came back. But I think there's this sense of togetherness, this space of saying like, we get all the information. When I would ask, tell me what's good, I would get good. I would say, okay, Zev's had these brain bleeds. That means he could have 0 motor function. We don't know. We won't know. Okay, well, what's good? And the doctor says, well, he was born at 23 weeks and had these brain bleeds versus he was born at 27 weeks and had these brain bleeds. Like his neural pathways haven't even connected, maybe. Like, we don't know. That feeling of we don't know. I mean, to us, that's where all the possibility lived because it felt human to us. It felt real. It felt like, hey, we are all looking at this baby and saying like, this may be really challenging down the line, but we won't know till we get there. And there's a lot between now and then. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but.
No, I really, thank you. Hearing you describe the multiple times where you're living in this gray zone of really not knowing what the future holds. Even it sounds like, minute to minute, hour to hour. I'm trying to imagine as a parent that you have a baby in an incubator. It's just so different than how you've imagined or experienced with other children, really motherhood. Um, was there anything in particular that we were able to do as far as your interaction with Zev or words that were used that really helped you feel like a parent in those moments?
Yeah, the bath. I like remember giving Zev his first bath. I remember Ben was able to give Zev his first bottle, right? So there are these little moments as a parent. We had had other children. We had twins before Zev. And we actually had one after. I mean, because we like to roll the dice, I guess. But we had kids at home. I think about all those parents who are first time parents sitting in the NICU. Um, it's the really little things that one of the doctors told us. They said, "Hey, you being here is really important because you're the only safe voice to Zev. You're the only safe touch. You're the only safe presence. He knows your voice from being in utero. Every other touch is violence to him. It is assaulting his body. It is assaulting his nervous system. All these things tests everything. And, with a 23-weeker, you are touching them as little as possible, but all the time. And Zev needed a pick line and Zev's needing these, and we just couldn't get it. So he's getting pricked all over. And the reality of it is, when I heard that like, hey, you're really important. You may seem like you can do nothing here because we could barely, we could put one finger on Zev and just hold it for 5 seconds. And then that was it, or whatever. And that felt like nothing. I just wanted to gather up my baby. And the reality is that was the only safe touch that Zev knew. And that empowered us as parents to continue to engage, to show up for Zev, to say, hey, I matter. Even though I can't run lines and change his diaper right now, or whatever. He's so, so critical. I mean, he still had like webbed hands and feet. Like Zev was like no eyelids, like goodness. Um, but we were still his parents. And so I think to feel that from the team, we were regarded as such. Um, it was a very kind thing that the team did for us, was to say, hey, you matter here more in some ways than all the other beeping and pokes and pricks and blood draws and all this stuff. Like that's all information. But what actually is going to give this kid permission to thrive is hearing that there's a safe space in this world. They don't know what this world is. They should be enveloped in liquid and cozy and just in your womb. And now they're not. And so they don't know. Now, again, we have a baby that's alive. I want to be really aware of that. I'm very sensitive to the fact that we saw babies with better, outcomes typically than Zev not make it. But with Zev, it was like, hey, this world is harsh and you are the safe space for this baby to give him permission to live because he might want to just bail because it's terrible here. So that really helped us. I'll never forget when our nurse, we couldn't hold Zev skin to skin. It was really a bad day for him. We were probably 2 months in, 3 months in. Gosh, I don't even remember, but we were in. So it was a little surprising that he couldn't just be popped onto my chest. He was backsliding a lot. And I got there and I was really upset because I was like, skin to skin, that's what's going to save his life, all this stuff. And she was so kind and she just said, let me just try something. We can't really put him on you right now, but she just swaddled him up and she just put him into the crook of my arm and nothing, he was very undisturbed. And I remember looking down and thinking, this is the first time I've ever looked at him as like a typical baby. Like, oh my gosh, I'm like looking down at like the quintessential, like, here he is just with his little blanket around his head. And even that, it was like a solution. Like that's what UC Health said to us. It was solution driven. Even if Zev, whatever, even if he backslid, he had to get reintubated, he had to get moved to an oscillator. I mean, all these terrible things that meant you're getting closer to the last option with this kid. We still found real good life in that time as his parents because the nurses and the doctors and everybody would just say, hey, what if we just offered you something that maybe you didn't think about? Like, okay, you can't do skin to skin. What if you just held him like this? And gosh, it was like a revelation every time. So I think just reminding parents like that they matter. when they can't do anything. You know, you can't do anything to save your son. We didn't love Zev more or pray for Zev more or fight for him more or whatever. Like Zev just lived. But I think for us, it was just reminding us like, hey, you're the safe place. Like you're a part of this whole narrative for Zev. You know, that's really important, I think, for a parent.
Thanks for that really important reminder for all of us. I mean, finding the beauty of parenthood, even in these most extreme situations. I want to make sure to open up to questions from the group, but I do have one more first. Thinking about, having a child who is so initially medically fragile, and thankfully is having, it sounds like has had such a robust outcome, that is just fantastic. How do you think that experience may have influenced your kind of communication surrounding his, it doesn't sound like he has many health needs outstanding, but kind of going forward, sometimes there's this description of sort of a medicalized, almost treating him like a fragile child for a period of time. What was that experience like for you?
So we've had a really interesting experience with Zev because, when we got out of UC Health, NICU, we were funneled, thank goodness, into the special care clinic over at Children's. So Zev knew his pediatricians, right? Like, and they knew him, and they had seen him get off the vent before, and all this kind of stuff. And one thing that was really helpful. Now, again, Zev was incredibly critical. However, the weird thing about Zev is that he's also remarkably robust, as you say. Like Zev, we were given the tools by our staff, by your staff, to say, hey, you'll know when Zev is in trouble because you can trust your instinct. And when he goes purple, give us a call. Like it was like very like, and I mean that in the best way. Like Zev is unique. Again, he doesn't have a trach. He doesn't have, we didn't have major surgeries or anything like that. So like Zev was a good case coming out of the NICU. But he was on oxygen for forever and his eyes are kind of jacked and whatever. But it's like the thing about Zev is, with us, it's like, well, he was supposed to be fully blind. So I mean, the fact that he can see it all is remarkable to us. And he has almost 20/20 in one of his eyes. Like his lungs like are not an issue right now. They are when he gets sick. He was in and out of the hospital a bit in his first couple of years. Um, we saw him go through so much that it kind of gave us like we just weren't afraid of anything because we had watched Zev die, basically. Like that really bad night. I mean, it's hard to overstate what it was like to release our son and just say, this is it. Oh, I'm getting like choked up now. That's so funny because he's like so thriving. But like we had seen a miracle with Zev. And so we just didn't feel afraid of whatever, anything that we got was a win with Zev. It didn't matter if he had oxygen forever, it didn't matter. And that's like, we're creating a space through our nonprofit where whatever these outcomes are, these kids can come and thrive. Because I think parents think my kid will never thrive if they have severe cerebral palsy. Or what does it mean that my son has a trach or my daughter, is blind? We're creating these accessible spaces so that parents can say, well, hey, let's just take that off the table because whatever comes, like there's a place for us. And we got that with Zev through our care team to say, hey, you can trust yourself with Zev's care. You have a team behind you that will know what to do if you need us. It allowed us to mature as parents of a medically complex kid. There was a lot of hand holding if we needed it, and a lot of sort of release if we wanted to just sort of see how there was always just a net to fall back on. But with Zev, what's interesting is that we have had to advocate in a different way, which is people see his chart and they say, well, this is the healthiest 23-weeker we've ever seen. You don't need us. And we're like, well, we still need therapies. We still need support, so we actually kind of have a different sort of swing is that Zev is so healthy. Hallelujah. Like whatever, who cares? He's so healthy. I don't care. We could never see another specialist again. Doesn't matter to me. But, it's like he's easy to write off because you don't see 23-weekers a lot like Zev. So you're sort of speaking to a unique case here. But I think that in the future, Zev will not be a unique case because we're seeing that with the care that is happening at UC Health, that I think policy was still 24 weeks when Zev was born, and we were a week under that. And you still were like, let's just try. Like, what a case study for Zev to come through that and be so healthy. But I think for us, it was there were moments where I would worry about taking him in. There's just trauma after the NICU. That's another thing our nonprofit addresses, is for the parents, like, to actually process these traumatic moments. Because I remember telling someone, like, every time we went back to the hospital, I'd be afraid they would keep him. And he was just going in for like a checkup, and he's fine. But I'm like, well, what if he's back in the NICU for 5 more months, whatever. Now, I would have taken the NICU 10 times what we spent there to get Zev. Whatever, who cares? People spend longer than we did. 5 months is nothing for some people. But, there are those residual things. But what we were given was a very strong safety net to say, trust yourself. And when you have questions, we're here to answer them. We're going to walk you through for the next 2 to 3 years around until Zev graduates from, care over at Children's. And you're just going to have all the tools that you need. So that was really helpful for having a medically complex kid, because it just gave us legs to stand on and say, okay, we can do this.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, and just to verbalize how impressive it is for us to hear, the NICU really can be a traumatizing experience, and that you guys have turned that pain really into such a purpose. So thanks for sharing about that. I see Lori has her hand raised. Please feel free, Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Sherlock. I'm one of the neonatologists. It's great to see you outside of the NICU. I am so grateful to you as a human being, and just hope, I'm guessing many people have told you this, but Zev's story is one of the things that really motivated our group to form this team, so that our policy now includes putting family in the center of this decision down to 22 weeks and 0 days. So your family has helped so many people in the greater Metro Denver region. And I just really want to thank you, not just for speaking to us, but for letting us take care of Zev, who I think many of us just deeply are rooting for still. But I had two questions, and then expect an email from me after this, because I hope to talk more. But my two questions, Stephanie, if you're called to do a peer-to-peer support for a parent who is about to have potentially a 22 or 23 weeker, what are the most important things you include? And then my second question is, if you talk to Zev about his origin story, and if so, how?
Oh, those are great questions. I'll start with the Zev side. He does know his origin story. He talks about his time in the hospital a ton. He has like friends from the NICU, that we talk about all the time. As he's grown, it's hard. Ben and I often talked a lot about sharing Zev's story when he can't decide if that's okay or not. We talked about the ethics of that, and especially as we're going through his medical records, and I'm sharing some of those things with people. And yeah, we do talk to Zev. It was cool too, because I also believed people were like, well, what if you're making this big thing about Zev? What about your other kids? What about, how are they going to feel? And I just believed that, so like part of my belief structure is that like whatever feels like it's being taken away is just going to be fulfilled 10 times from now. And I just believed that about our family, that the twins would feel in communion with Zev, that it would be this like really unique whole family experience, which again is something that is coming out of stuff with four, though. That's like, you see siblings of these medical complex kids come to our events, and they get to connect with each other when like their little sibling can't go anywhere. They're going to hospital stuff all the time. They can't really, it can take a lot from a family. And so we want to do what we got with Zev, which was say, hey, we're going to share Zev's story with Zev, with his siblings, with other kids, so that they can see like, oh, there's like fullness here. It's not that I don't get to go to that birthday party because I could get sick and then my little sister could get sick. It's, hey, there are places where we're going to be able to feel a fullness as a family. And I think in sharing Zev's story, it's so cool. I think he loves it. I think he just thinks it's just so funny that like, he's in the hospital. He was so little, we show him how big he was. And It's been a joy to share it with him. And I think someday he might have an opinion, a true opinion about that, and we'll walk that out. And we are cautious. We don't share everything with everyone. But I do think with Zev, it felt like not sharing his story, like the miracle just needed to be shared. Like, because then somewhere, someday, somebody could say, hey, well, I heard about this kid Zev. Like he lived, like maybe our son will live. Now, I would say talking peer to peer, one of the things that, again, I'm just very sensitive to is that a lot of these babies don't make it. And, or a lot of these kids will have incredibly severe disabilities and outcomes that are going to present different challenges than we've had with Zev's outcomes. But I think for us, it was just about the surrender. It was just to say, hey, you're going to have a lot of information thrown at you. Like with Tell Me What's Good, it allowed us to sort of stop that scary narrative and give us just a breath and just say, okay, like here's all this bad as a parent. Well, what's good? Okay, well, now there's just a little something, like whatever. And then that sort of leads you to like listening to your intuition. Like, what do I believe to be true about our family or about this baby or about life or death or disabilities or whatever? All these questions. And then you can really like ask yourself, like, okay, so now that I've sort of sorted that out, like what is my instinct, my intuition, really, that inner truest voice telling me to do here or what path to go forward on? And then ultimately you're like, and I'm just going to surrender the outcome. So like, I just believe that hope, like I said, is a posture that whatever outcome happens, live, die, never, 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 that like you will be met on the other side of that. And that's what I tell other parents who, a lot of people who get a hold of us have like 26 weekers, 25 weekers. Um, and they're reaching out to say like, well, what did you do when this happened? And we always just are like, we just surrendered to say, whatever comes, we're going to be able to walk it. Whatever happens, there's going to be like love that's going to meet us on the other side of this. And so it's really just about trusting that intuition, listening to that inner voice, getting rid of all the like noise and just saying like, hey, what's the truest thing for me? What can I live with? Like, it's not a right or wrong decision to pursue life. Like that, I think sometimes people try to say, like, oh, you did the right thing because Zev's alive. Like, well, Zev just as easily could have not been alive. There's no right or wrong in an impossible choice. But there was an opportunity to just say, hey, I'm going to just let go of my expectations for what can happen. And when we did that, we were met with a greater sense of love and care and understanding of what we are and aren't capable of. And that's what I would say to peer is just like, hey, what's your truest voice telling you? Honor that, listen to that, and just let go of what your expectations are of the future. They could be better than you even imagine. They could be more full of grief than you even know. But like those things can coexist together too. I don't know if that helps. It's a lot of blah, 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 but it worked for us.
Thanks so much. Can I open up for any other questions?
I would love to ask a question. Hi there, my name is Susan Huang. I'm one of the other neonatologists. I'm sorry that I hopped on late. And I really thank you so much for sharing your story. And I thank Laura Mars for facilitating this really, really important discussion. As I hear you speak so eloquently with such what seems like emotional clarity with language and words, I think that many of us on this call can understand easily and empathize with. I wonder about those families that are not like us, that come from different backgrounds, either by a difference in racial, ethnic background, socio-political, economic, educational, where their sociocultural, economic norms are really different from many of us here in this Zoom room. Um, and wondering, how the healthcare providers can better navigate that. Clearly you felt very connected and well supported in the prenatal and then in the postnatal space at UCH. I fear that not all families feel that. And I think we still struggle a lot with making the deep connections that you felt you had, in the NICU. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great question, because the reality of it is, like, we are privileged and could say, hey, if Zev grows up and can't walk, talk, eat, breathe, whatever, we'll build him the best wheelchair. If we can't get it through our insurance, which is also a privilege that we even had insurance at all. I mean, that our insurance was willing to cover the helicopter ride, right? Like all these different things. We had a support system. We had a community that would say, hey, can I show up and walk your dog? Hey, can I do that? We have our own business, right? We could make our own hours. Like, I worked from the NICU. Like, there are things like we had so much privilege in that season in so many ways. Again, a reason why we wanted to start for this, just say, like, wherever you are, like, there's a place for you, no matter what, at the end of this. Um, and I think one of the things that was helpful to think through when I was talking with Dr. Barry is this idea of, and you all have already mentioned it here, really meeting the family where they are. So, like, hearing their story, what's important to them. Like for us, um, I had seen so many stories of, like I said, when I think about, oh, well, there's 1% of kids out there who have survived, like that could be our kid. Like that's a very like privileged position to think through, to say like, hey, that could be ours. Now, I do think in some ways, like the NICU, like meeting a family where they are with different cultural needs too, like access to the baby, um, creating space for whole family engagement if you could, meeting people where they are and just hearing from them, listening to them about what is important to them, and honoring that. I think just being seen in the NICU allowed us to walk out of there, say, like, very uplifted. That when we would say, hey, this is how I want to do it, nobody said that's a terrible idea, or we don't do it like that here, or whatever. It was really honored. And that, I mean, I can only speak from our own experience, but I would just say like that was the key for us. And I think it would be key for everyone who walks in that door to just say, hey, oh, I want to share this story. This was one of the most impactful things. There was a baby next to us so we were talking about what makes you feel like a parent. And there was a baby next to us. We're in open pods. We could hear a lot of the stuff going on. We had been there forever. This baby comes in, they're detoxing. It's all this really rough stuff. Parents are coming in and out. I'm chatting with the parents, or, the grandparents or whatever. And there's this custody thing and, who's going to take the baby, and the mom's not allowed to see it, da, da, da. And then the birth mother came in and she was so sweet. And I was just like, um, gosh, I was just touched by the fact that she was there, that she could be there, because she had also gone through her own process to be able to get into those doors. And I like heard the nurse say to her, oh, he really likes that. You're doing such a good job. Now, this mom was not able to keep this baby. She had told me that. The mom had, the nurses were very private, but the mom had told me that and things like that. To hear her say, am I doing this right? And to hear someone say, you are, oh, he loves that. That mom was met as a human, as a person, as someone who has a whole story before they came into this NICU. There was no judgment. There was no resentment. There was only an open arm, a heart to this person to say, you did a big, hard thing. You were so tender. Like it like changed my whole life. Like I heard that. I'm still I will never forget that moment of humanity. And to meet with that mom after in the hallway or by the pumping stuff or whatever, and just be like, hey, what was that like? Oh, it was incredible. Like that openness to whoever is walking in that door to say, what do you need to feel loved, engaged, seen in this situation? I think that would go so far for people coming from different cultural backgrounds, family backgrounds, priorities. I mean, some people, for some people, if they hear the word disability, it's not something they want to pursue, like that is hard to hear. And I mean, that person is still a person too. It's like people come from so many different places when they land in the NICU, and to just hear them, I think really bolsters, regardless of their backgrounds or their narrative or whatever. It just, again, we had the resources. So I don't want to gloss over that and be like, like we had every resource we needed. And, um, and for those that don't, it can still be a place where they are heard and valued and seen as important people to this baby. All of the team, every single person who shows up for that baby. Wow, how hard that might be for some people. How beautiful that they're even there, scared, shaking, can't touch their baby, whatever. Like you're feeling so much guilt, you're feeling so many things as a parent. And to honor, like, hey, where are you coming from? Okay, well, I can meet you in that space, whatever it is. I think that might help sort of bring some more equity of just like really seeing people for people in a very big crisis, regardless. I don't know if that helps.
That was incredible. And now I'm crying. Um, so I thank you for sharing that. I think at times we feel that we don't have the resources, we don't have the bandwidth, we don't have X, Y, we don't have the dollars in the health system to really address all of these other things that impact our families, all the social determinants of health, racism and bias, etc. But literally what you're saying is that we connect on a human level and we meet people where they are and we see the humanity in our families. And I just cannot think of a better way to practice neonatology. So I thank you so much.
I know we're running over, you guys, and I also know we started a little late. But I just want to make sure to thank Stephanie. I'm just so grateful to you, and grateful for what we've learned from Zev. I want to share with you that I think he was really one of the inspirations for our extreme preterm program. And we've had 24 babies on our protocol since 22. And I'm just really proud of the team and very grateful to everyone. So thank you so much for sharing your story so eloquently. I really feel like you've provided insight for us into the parent experience that is really hard to verbalize. And you clearly have such a gift for it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for taking a chance on Zev, for just saying yes when like hospital policy was not quite there yet. And you were just like, we're going for it. Like Zev, I just know the impact that it has on you too. I don't want that to go overlooked. We have a very successful, beautiful story. We are so lucky. What I do want to say too, I want to just remind everyone at the preemie party, we all stood around talking about our miracle kids, talking about, oh, they beat every odds, the staff, like our kids are amazing, blah, blah, blah. And then they all came and we looked at them and they all had different outcomes, every single one of them, to varying degrees of extremes and whatever. And yet we all use the same language about our children. Oh, they're miracles. Oh, they beat the odds. Oh, no one thought they were going to live. And here they are. Every single one of us was lit up around our children. And that's because of all of you. And I don't want it to go overlooked how hard, having been on the parent side of a 23-weeker, I can't imagine, but how hard that must be for your team to have to really take on 22 and 23-weekers. It's so devastating, I bet, at times. There's a lot that you must have to handle. Just thank you for even just creating a space that there is a possibility. So whatever that outcome is. But thank you for just doing your part, for using our story, for sharing it. And, we're out here championing you. I don't want you all to feel alone in how hard this is. We're with you too out here. So thank you for everything you all do.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. It's really an honor to care for these babies and have cared for Zev. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.